Town Bank Mortgage, NMLS number 512138, is an equal housing lender. This podcast is for informational purposes only. And now, the man born with a 5 o'clock shadow and with the NMLS number 2028-201. He is a gentleman. He is a scholar. He is
Tyler Cralle.
All right, welcome everyone to the latest edition of the Cape Fear Report. I, of course, am the host, Tyler Cralle, loan officer at Town Bank Mortgage right here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And we're changing things up here today. I think this is the first time I've had a home builder here on the program. So joining us here on the latest episode is the president of Wallace Custom Homes, Greg Wallace. So, Greg, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
So, appropriately named company. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, normally I start out by asking everybody kind of how they got into real estate, but considering your family's in that, I kind of already know the answer. So, let's kind of make it maybe a little bit deeper background and say how your family got into custom home building.
Sure. Yeah. Great question. My dad started the company back in 1976. So started it in Wake County up near Raleigh.
So 50 years, huh?
Yeah, 50 years.
Nice.
We celebrated our 50th anniversary back in January. We had a great party. It was a lot of fun. Had a lot of our past clients join us and stuff that we'd built for over the years. And it was really rewarding to kind of like catch up with them, see them. And we hosted it at a house that we built. It was an oceanfront house down there in Carolina Beach, and just happened to be one of those like random 70-degree days that we get in January.
Oh, yeah.
So it was kind of it was maybe January, it might have been February, I can't remember. But anyway, we planned the party, and then we were like, oh man, what if the weather's no good? But phenomenal weather, great party, a lot of good time. So yeah, he's been doing it for 50 years, believe it or not. Yeah, 1976 is when he started. In Wake County, and then he and my mom moved down here about 20 years ago.
Okay, I got you.
Yep.
All right, so he started in Wake County.
He did.
That's where he started. Okay,
Yep.
gotcha.
Yep. Started in Wake County at the time, 20 years ago. So I'm the oldest of 4 boys.
Okay.
I had another brother that was here in Wilmington at the time. This was back in 2004, 2005. He was doing well as a contractor. He was a commercial contractor, and then working for a commercial contractor up in Baltimore. And then he and his wife decided to move down here, and he started his own residential contracting company, and was doing really well, like all builders were in 2005 and 2006. And my dad was kind of looking at, I was down here, my brother was down here. Where my dad had kind of started back in Wake County in 1976, there was a different game back then. It was a lot of old farmers were selling their tobacco fields to a developer, and the developer was putting together a team of 5 or 6 builders, and they would just kind of go from one abandoned tobacco field to another and put together a builder team, and the builders would work on building out the houses in the lots while the developer went out and found the next piece of dirt. And then probably in the 80s, sometime in the mid to late 80s, certainly by the early 90s, a lot of the big nationals had kind of come into the Tri-County market.
Gotcha.
Let's say Tri-County, that's the triangle market, I guess, not to get confused with the Tri-County market here, but the triangle market. So all the big nationals came into the Wake County, the Research Triangle Park, and it started to make it really difficult for small builders like my dad to be able to compete. And so he got off and kind of started doing some other smaller things. But then he kind of saw that my brother was down here, I was down here, and he and my mom decided to move down here, and he was going to kind of ease into retirement. We partnered up on a few things up in Hampstead right as the recession started to set in. And then we were kind of stuck in that whole 2008 meltdown of the housing industry. And then we've kind of worked our way out of that. And then, he just really enjoys working, so
he just kept doing
it, And
so you were in home building, or were you in something? Okay.
No, I was at that time. Believe it or not, I was a school teacher. So my background is in education. I had a degree in middle school education, and I was actually working at Trask Middle School, and was teaching with another teacher. Her husband was Ralph Conradi, Conradi and Son Construction. So that summer I went to work for Ralph and just never went back to teaching. And then eventually partnered up with my dad during the prior to 2006 or 2008, and then that all fell apart. But then we put it back together and got the wheels back on the car and got back on the road, and here we are today. So Yeah.
Well, so I did kind of want to ask you about, because real estate's all local, right? I mean, there's no doubt about that. But home building is the same. And how do you feel the sort of home building kind of industry is doing right now? Because obviously, we had the boom of COVID and things have definitely calmed down, but it does seem like things are still pretty busy. I mean, if you drive around, you're seeing a lot of renovation projects, a lot of tear downs. Because obviously we're running out of land in Wilmington, but how do you guys feel about, or how do you feel kind of about just the home building industry here in this area?
Generally, I think this area, I still feel positive on, I feel really positive on first of all, let's talk about our state, right? I think the state of North Carolina is a phenomenal state to live in and certainly to move to if you're from out of state, right? I mean, we've got within a 6-hour drive, you can be in some of the most beautiful mountains on the planet and some of the most beautiful beaches on the planet all within the same day. So I think that North Carolina, and this is a big, I'm not trying to say that we're anywhere near as beautiful as California, but I feel like for the East Coast states, right? For the East Coast, I can't think of a better state to live in than North Carolina. So I do, and I think a lot of people agree just by, if you look at the data. I think that, I went to that housing and economic forum that they do every year, and they bring in the professor from the UNCW and a couple other national economists, one from the Realtor Association and one from the Homebuilders Association. But anyway, North and South Carolina were the two the biggest gainers of net in-migration on a, not so much on like a volume basis, but maybe on a percentage basis, however that shakes out. But anyway, North and South Carolina definitely have the most influx of all the 50 states of people wanting to move to this area. So you ask about how home building is, and I think North Carolina is a great state. And then you look at within North Carolina, I think it's hard to beat where we live. I mean, we've got a vibrant community. You look at a lot of the other beach communities in North Carolina. Wilmington's probably the only one that I can think of that is vibrant 12 months out of the year. We've got the downtown with the Riverwalk and all of that in the historical downtown, and we've got the university here. There's always something going on, whereas if you look at a lot of the other coastal communities in the state, they kind of shut down for, outside of the summer months, right?
Yeah, the Outer Banks does,
Yeah. And, we've got I-40, so we're 2 hours away from Raleigh. We've got a great airport. I mean, there's just so many things going for Wilmington. And I think that's what we're seeing in home building is that post-COVID, certainly we had that big COVID boom. Yes, it's definitely slowed down since COVID. But I think that what we're seeing maybe as a lingering effect from that whole COVID thing is that maybe that's kind of what it took for the spotlight to be kind of shined on this area, if that makes any sense. I think we were kind of still under the radar a little bit pre-COVID. I think now everybody knows about southeastern North Carolina.
Well,
and particularly Wilmington. Brunswick County is kind of a different animal. That's always been in the headlines as one of the fastest growing counties in the nation, yada, yada. They've got a lot of land out there, so it's different circumstances. But Wilmington in particular, Wrightsville Beach, Carolina Beach, Curie Beach, even Topsail Island. They're fully discovered now.
Well, so you guys are headquartered in Carolina Beach, right?
We are.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, because it is kind of amazing because, a lot of people talk about Wilmington, but we've seen so much growth in some of the other areas that sometimes it's funny when people lump it all together because they are very different. Some people be like the Wilmington area, but it's like, man, it's like Wrightsville Beach and Carolina Beach are very different versus, Curry Beach and then you go down like an hour, right? And then Southport's and so it's like, it's funny how we all get kind of lumped in, but we're getting so much bigger that each area is developing its own kind of like personality and kind of identity and everything else. I did want to point this out that the latest report from the Census Bureau had building permits in the Wilmington metro area. So that's, a good part of some of the other counties as well. It had them at an adjusted annual rate of about 824 in April, which was up about 5% from March, and was close to 20-year highs. Now, we're seeing similar data from statewide, as you pointed out. North Carolina's killing it. North Carolina in general was up about 9,325, a 20% jump from March, and was the third highest reading in the past 20 years. And so it seems like even after COVID, we're still seeing like a ton of at least building permits. And of course, building permits are building permits. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see the house start and then get to completion. Those are whole other aspects of it. But that was the data that I saw recently. And so, like I said, I mean, that was actually a question I had for you, like with regards to building permits. So that's not necessarily a completely new house, is it? Or when you do a renovation project, are you also getting building permits? I assume you are. So, I mean, that could entail, I guess, new builds and renovation projects.
Yeah, exactly. I think what that's a reflection of is just building activity in general.
Yeah.
And yet, no, not everybody pulls a permit for some kind of, typical homeowner may not pull a permit to remodel their own bathroom. But if you're a licensed contractor doing it used to be $30,000 worth of work, you had to pull a permit. I think they've increased that now to, I believe, $50,000 you have to have a permit for. But anyway, but yeah, it's just a reflection of building activity in general.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned Brunswick County. Obviously, you're, in Carolina Beach, which is, has seen just tremendous growth just in Carolina Beach area. That seems to be the only place that we really can continue this growth that we've been having. Is sort of in the Brunswick and Pender County areas, because we're running out of room in New Hanover County. So are you guys seeing like a ton more business kind of in Brunswick County than what you're seeing in New Hanover?
We have actually never built in Brunswick County, so we're just we're just now getting into. We are going to be building in a new neighborhood down there in Southport called Waterway. It's going to be an amazing neighborhood. It's right there, basically in the heart of downtown Southport. But that's going to be for us our first venture over the river into Brunswick County. So I can't speak to Brunswick County specifically, but yeah, you're right about New Hanover County. Absolutely, it is getting more and more difficult to find vacant lots to build on. Carolina Beach specifically, we're doing a lot of tear downs. There's a lot of old housing stock. That's kind of the great thing about construction. Like my dad says, they're either always building it, fixing it up, or tearing it down. And it's just kind of this cycle that just kind of like, it just always evolves and rolls, right? So Wilmington, you've got a lot of, you think of like, I don't know I think is it Longleaf Hills over there by the mall?
Mm-hmm.
You think of those neighborhoods, those old 1950s ranches, beautiful lots, centrally located. But the housing stock's getting to be outdated, right? And so that's going to be some really, you look at, what's the one with the golf course? Is it?
The one they tore down?
No, it's the one on the way to Carolina Beach. It's Pine Valley. Is that right? Pine Valley. You got a country club back in there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you look at a neighborhood like Pine Valley, another good example, right? Great location, huge lots, but just outdated, and somewhat well maintained for the most part. But, people change, right? Lifestyles change. And so some of these older homes that worked well in the 1940s and 50s in terms of the floor plan, right, isn't really as suited to today's lifestyle. And so now you've got people that want to fix these houses up, or at some point they'll probably be doing tear downs if they haven't already started in places like Pine Valley and Longleaf, the one over there by the mall,
So is that, I had Travis Beatty on the show, and he would talk about infill developments as kind of being like a good thing that we can do that kind of can, I think, expedite the building process, because you already have kind of an area that's already been built and so is that something that's also not only going to make it something that's possible because of these areas that we already have homes on them, but is that also more attractive to a lot of buyers if you're sort of buying like a lot or anything that is sort of a rundown house or whatever? Is that something that makes more sense versus finding a completely brand new lot and it's more difficult to then build and get the permitting and everything else versus one that there already was a house there that might be a tear down, or there was a house there? And
yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of that comes down to the economics of what you're paying, for the existing home versus what it's going to cost you to either take it down entirely and start from scratch, or invest in fixing it up to get it to the lifestyle or floor plan that you want to meet our modern lifestyle, I'll call it, versus the 1940s lifestyle, right? So that's a question of economics. And then, of course, location, right?
Yeah.
So that always plays into it. But yes, from a lot of standpoints, absolutely. You've already got your water and sewer infrastructures in place. Your roadways are already in place. So from like development cost standpoint, that's certainly advantageous to be, I'll call it recycling our housing stock, but you can still, you can find, so Carolina Beach is totally different, right? So Carolina Beach was never any kind of master planned community. It was always kind of like the Wild West. It wasn't that long ago. They still had gravel roads and stuff down there. You know what I mean? And so there you're buying a lot and you're having to coordinate with the town to get your water tap installed, your sewer tap installed. And, there's fees associated with that, of course. I think what does become challenging, what we're seeing a lot in the news nowadays, is like, let's look at Brunswick County. I'm by no means any kind of expert on Brunswick County, but basically what you have in Brunswick County, from what I can tell, is a lot of people that currently live there don't want there to be any more development. You know what I mean? But you've got a lot of land there, right? Yeah. You've got a lot of people that want to move to this part of the world, but you do have some real challenges from the town level, the state level. We've got a responsibility, I feel like, to make the highest and best use of the land, right? And I think that in a lot of cases that's going to be residential development. You cannot stop the people from wanting to move here. That's why we're here, right? We love it. It's a beautiful place. There's a lot of people that want to move here. So I think Brunswick County, although it does have its challenges, I think that well managed, which it seems like they're kind of really working hard on the whole sewer situation. I think you manage that process well, and it'll be good for everybody. I mean, I always look at it like this. I mean, would you rather be in a town that's shrinking in population and you're seeing your favorite restaurant get boarded up with some plywood because they don't have enough customers to stay open, or would you rather live in a town that has an influx of people and things just keep getting better and better, like it has in Wilmington for the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Or more. I mean, I've been here since 1993. I came down here to go to UNCW. I mean, Eastwood Road was a two-lane road. Mayfair was a cow pasture.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people like shopping at Mayfair. I'm just saying. I mean, it's gotten nicer. I mean, yes, a cow pasture's maybe more attractive to look at, right? But they did a pretty nice job when they developed Mayfair. It's not unattractive.
I don't know. I mean, I think Mayfair's pretty cool to look at, especially at night with the lights and everything.
I mean,
downtown too. I mean, it's when you drive over that bridge, right? If you're going over like the Isabel Holmes Bridge or whatever, and kind of coming around, and you see that kind of waterfront downtown view, and it's at night, and you have all these new buildings and residential complexes, and you're like, wow, we got a really good looking downtown. Yeah. And I get it. Like, I understand. I talked about this. I had Luke Waddell on the show last week, and, we were talking about that because, obviously he was on the city council, and the amount of letters and emails and Facebook posts about development, and sort of this idea that, every politician's getting rich off of all of these deals, which is, really funny because, half the time I can't figure out how they think they're getting paid off of them. But you're right. I mean, we have two options really, because no growth is not an option. That doesn't happen, right? I mean, the only way that happens is, I guess, maybe if you're like New York, where you literally, it's almost impossible to build anywhere else, but even they still have growth if you look at the
absolutely.
population. Mm-hmm. So you either shrink or you grow. And to your point is, you look at, some of these places where, they built up in maybe the 50s or 60s, and it was mostly because of some manufacturing plant or the headquarters of some company that then moved, and the town disappeared. And so you have some people that are still trying to live in these towns. They can't sell their house because there's no people to buy it. And you see that. I mean, you can look at the national data and see where that is happening. I mean, one of the biggest misconceptions we have is that people look at national housing inventory and go, well, everything that looks about normal. And you go, yeah, but the problem is so many of those homes are in places where no one wants to live. So it's like having a house like in rural Ohio is getting counted the same as having a house on Wrightsville Beach in the data, right? Because it's one house. But the problem is they're very different houses with regards to demand. And so it gives you a misconception of the picture, because you would think, oh man, Wilmington, we have a ton of houses. Like, look how many more houses we have now than we did, 20 years ago. So man, we must have an oversupply. Nope. Because we've had 30% more people move down here. So even though the housing stock is more, we have more people. And to your point, they're coming. Yeah. They're moving here. And I mentioned this with Luke, and I'm going to keep mentioning it. My concern is that I don't want people who have been here for multiple generations to get priced out because we are not building. And what's going to happen is the people who are moving here, their incomes aren't tied to this economy. they're tied to wherever they're working. Or they might be retired. They might, work in some other place and they're buying a second home or whatever it might be. Or they're working remote. They can work wherever. And so they can pay whatever for a house. And so the people whose incomes are based on this economy are the ones who are going to go, well, I can't get that house now. And I don't want that to happen. And so it's funny that a lot of times people say, oh, you only want new people to come here. No, I want the people who are here to be able to stay here. And to do that, we have to build the housing for the people that are moving here. So from your perspective, are you dealing with a lot of people who are moving here or people who are already here and maybe want to get that dream house?
Great question. Yeah, we keep data on all that. And over the last several years, what we've seen is about 50%, and we don't do a ton of homes a year. We're doing 12 to 15 homes a year. So I'm still a very small builder. So, but anyway, out of the homes that we do, about 50% of them are from folks relocating within Wilmington, maybe moving up into, maybe their family's grown in size. Maybe they're wanting to get, in some cases, wanting to get down into a beach community like Carolina Beach, Curie Beach. Or they just, their home is, for whatever reason, they're kind of moving within Wilmington, right? It could be school district, whatever. And then we have about the other 50% are folks that are moving from out of state. So we get a lot of folks, as we all know, that kind of come from the northern states. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania seem to be the top three up north. And then, what's kind of surprising to me here lately is I've seen a lot of folks moving from states like Colorado and California, which, you would think beautiful states, a lot of outdoor activities to, a lot of a lot of scenery. And even they're deciding to move to Wilmington, North Carolina. So for various reasons, a lot of them seem to be moving for taxes have gotten too high, regulations gotten out of control, and a little bit of a backlash. We saw a lot of that during COVID, but that's still kind of a trend that's still somewhat continuing. So yeah, 50% from moving within Wilmington, 50% from out of state.
Now, you guys mentioned, since was it 15 homes you guys built about a year? Okay, so do you guys have, because if you go into like a big builder, they'll be like, here are the 4 houses that you can build. And so, I actually have no idea about this. So do you guys have like certain plans? I'm sure you do. But do you guys mostly kind of work off of, hey, here's kind of an idea and then we can manipulate some part of it and change part of it? Or are you guys just like straight from scratch? Like, how do you want to do this?
Sure. That's a great question. And a lot of people, that's one of the first questions we ask when we're meeting with clients is, have you ever built a home from the ground up? Because it's like I tell a lot of people, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It is a journey from where we're at today without a plan to handing you over the keys for you to move into it. But in answer to your question, we have some plans that we build somewhat regularly, but we also have plans that we do one time and never build them again. So
Gotcha.
So we do a little bit of both, and I think that's kind of a little bit of there's certainly efficiencies from the builder's standpoint. You can get really efficient. This is what the national guys do, or even the big regional guys, and even some of the big local guys here in our own market. You can get really efficient at building the same plan over and over again, and that. Truthfully, absolutely. Does that help the end user, the consumer? For sure. If you know exactly what your costs are going into it because you've built this plan 50 or 100 times, then you can say with certainty this plan's going to cost you X amount of money.
Yeah.
But if you're building a plan from scratch and you're trying to work with the client on meeting their wish list and stuff, that does get a little bit more challenging to price it accurately but I think generally the client, that's oftentimes what they're coming to us for, is because they don't want that prescripted, you get to choose from one of 4 plans.
Gotcha.
So we try to solve for that equation by allowing and offering to.
It would seem like that would be the real benefit that you guys have, because the big guys are never going to be able to do that, because to your point, like they have this business model, and it's based on margins and it's based on exact amounts, and they can't allow Wilmington to be different than somewhere in DC or somewhere in Colorado, because then all of a sudden it's impossible. Like they have to scale, and so they can never go pure custom. And so it seemed like that would be one of the benefits that you guys have, is that you guys do have that ability to maneuver, and you're more agile, and you're able to customize things where they're like, nope, you can't go a little bit more in that area because we can't plan for that.
That's right. You're 100% right. And that's where we really try to like carve out our niche is kind of, I don't want to say catering to that necessarily, but we do try to service that really well. And we do offer kind of what I would consider a pretty high level of service from day one, just initial consultation, all the way through to handing over the keys. We try to give a level of service that's above and beyond what you would get from a big national builder. And we also, we can change things on the fly during construction. We don't necessarily like to do that, but I mean, that's kind of what the client is. That's why they came to us in the beginning, was because they wanted the ability to be able to have some input on some of that stuff and have somebody that they can trust to deliver on that, So yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a competitive advantage to be kind of a little bit smaller in some regards, and be more flexible to accommodate those clients and service them really well.
And so when you mentioned building like 15 houses, like is that sort of, you guys kind of are like, hey, we don't want to go above that amount. I mean, I'm sure you can obviously move it around a little bit, but
yeah.
I mean, you also don't want to get too big where you just have too many projects, and then you kind of lose that kind of boutique aspect of what you guys do.
Sure. Yeah. I think that, like we were talking about with towns, right? Companies are really no different. It's really difficult, I think, in life in general, or specifically in business. It's difficult. You can't ever stay plateaued or stagnant, right? So you've always got to be growing. I think the question for me a lot as the owner and as the president is, and kind of the leader, is like, what does growth look like, right? Because not all growth is sales revenue or increase in number of units. I mean, because you do have to balance that. I mean, if you get like I'll admit, 15 houses right now is really kind of stretching my team, and
Yeah.
to deliver 15 homes well over the course of 12 months is a tall order. But so then you could grow by adding more staff, right? But it's not quite that simple, because staff takes overhead and revenue. So then you've got to increase your sales, and so it's a balance, I guess. It's a balance. But yeah, we would probably prefer to stay. I'd like to be slightly bigger than where we are, but more than anything, growth to me right now would look like maybe streamlining some of our processes and procedures to make that client experience a little bit better, and to make the experience for my employees a little bit less stressful day to day. But at the end of the day, it's home building, so it's always going to be kind of stressful.
I did want to ask about 2008, because or the impact that we're still sort of kind of feeling from 2008, which was, if you look at the data, I mean, leading up to 2008, we had record employment in the construction industry, and then the housing crisis caused a absolute collapse of labor. And as home building kind of slowly came back, we then had, of course, the COVID boom. And then all of a sudden people couldn't keep up because we didn't have anywhere near enough employees, laborers, to be able to do a lot of these jobs. And that is one of the arguments that I hear from a lot of people, is that so many of the, not only just labor itself, but the skilled labor, the masons and other people who had been in the business maybe, 20 years, 30 years, something like that. And 2008 basically convinced them to retire because activity had dropped so low. And then activity was so low for so long, nobody was getting into the business. And so how do you feel about the labor perspective with regards to home building now that we have seen that kind of boom, but we still are seeing demand? Is it still difficult to find qualified people, especially for skilled labor positions, to work on your sites?
Short answer is yes. But it's I feel like it's getting better. I think there's a little bit of a cultural shift that's happening just psychologically, maybe, within our country, at least certainly here in our little local area. I think that, you see it a lot on social media too. I think there is a resurgence in the pride aspect of maybe going into the trades, being an ex-teacher. I remember when I was teaching, it didn't seem like, let me back up. I remember when I was a student, right, in high school. I graduated in 93. Shop class was still a big deal.
Yeah.
They had wood shop, they had auto shop. That was still pretty well taught. Vocational teaching was still a part of the high school curriculum. I remember when I was a middle school teacher, so a little bit different, but it seemed like there was a period where we kind of really got away from that whole vocational aspect in high schools and middle schools. And I think that, coupled with the whole meltdown in 2008, it's just bad timing, right? A lot of those guys that were working, had been doing construction for 20 or 30 years, they were probably nearing retirement anyway, right? But then you have something like 2008 that forces a lot of people into retirement, coupled with the fact that we haven't been doing a whole lot of vocational training for the last 20 to 30 years. Now we find ourselves in a situation where we've really got this void of like, how are we going to get the work done? You know, and there may be, it seems like there's a movement now to kind of re-emphasize the trades. You know, you seem like there's a big push now for, you know, learn to be an electrician or a plumber or a heating and air guy or girl, whatever. But
it's that and the fact that you're hearing about the shortage,
right?
And so that's causing the salaries to skyrocket. Where you hear about like HVAC guys, you know, making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, and there's no, you know, they have no college debt. And you know, they're going in as an apprentice, they're learning the business, and then, you know, maybe after 10 years, they then start their own company or, you know, take over the company or whatever it may be. And people are going, wow, that sounds way better than going $150,000 in debt and then starting off entry level, making barely enough to make your student loan payments. And it seems like, oh, that's a dead end job where it's like, you want to be an entrepreneur. It used to be, you know, you'd go work in maybe tech or something, which is still there. But now it's like, you want to be an entrepreneur? Start an HVAC company. Start becoming an electrician.
Sure.
And you can work, make your own hours, be your own boss. And then people are like, that actually sounds pretty awesome. And I mean, as everyone knows, you know, you're probably the same. You know, it's sort of like in the mortgage business where it's like, yeah, I make my own hours, but if I don't eat, you know, I don't work, I don't eat.
That's right.
So
I do make my own hours, and it's 24/7. It's called 24/7. And yeah.
And so I feel like you are seeing that. I think, yeah, you're right. You know, education was like, everyone has to go to college. And I understand that because going to college is a good experience.
Sure.
You learn a lot. And for a lot of people, it is a good way to go. But to put yourself into that much debt and then to get a degree that maybe isn't worth that much, then the economics comes in. And it's like, you know what? Maybe that's not the path for you. Here are some other options. And I think the fact that the problem I think with 2008 is that, and you see this today, is that everyone is now convinced that the housing market is going to collapse every 10 years. And the fact that it hasn't, I think, is people are going, you know what, maybe getting into a trade does have value. Because I think the fear after 08 was, all right, let's say I become a mason, or let's say I become, you know, some aspect of the home building process. Well, what's going to happen when the housing market collapses again? And the fact that we're now seeing that, you know what, it's not supposed to do that.
No.
And so there is that you can't have that job, and you're not going to have to leave the profession after 10 years.
Right. In fact, I think there's a lot of signals that probably point to the contrary of that. Now, certainly housing's very cyclical, right?
Yeah,
so you've
absolutely.
got ups and downs, but I'm sure that now I've never been, apart from in teaching, I've never really been in any other industry. And my dad was, from the time I was, I don't know, 1 or 2 years old, he's been a home builder. So our family's just always known home building. But it's certainly cyclical, absolutely. But I think there's a lot of, I'd like to and like to believe this as well. But I think the fundamentals, I think, of the housing market are still pretty stable. I think what happened in 2008 was that we just kind of got playing around with some really questionable lending practices, and, you know, and that all unraveled. I don't see that. I'm not an economist. I don't pretend to be one on TV, but you know, I don't see that happening right now, and I think there's still a pent up demand for housing.
Definitely,
I think
area.
the affordability thing is that would be more of a challenge in my mind than the collapse. Now, will the lack of affordability lead to some kind of collapse? You know, perhaps. I don't know. That's well,
it's interesting what you're saying with the data, is because what's happening is there was a report that was circling on Twitter and Facebook and some other places, and people were using it as an example of, here comes the housing crash. And what it was is that people were listing their house and then they were pulling it. And it was the highest amount of sellers had pulled their listings since, I can't remember when the data started. I think it was 2013. And because I think it was from Redfin, which I think Redfin's been around since 2013, so most of their data only goes back that far. But it's like, what what's different now versus then is that the reason people are pulling their listing is because they're like, this is what I want to sell the house for. But if I can't sell for that, then I'm not going to sell it. I don't have to get out of this house. In 2008, people were like, I have to get out of this house. And so either someone bought it,
right?
They did a short sale, or they just walked away from it.
Yeah.
People are just are seeing if they can sell their house to maybe move for whatever reason. But if not, they're like, fine, I'll stay here with my 2% mortgage.
That's right.
And it's like, that is a reason why the possibility of there being a collapse makes no sense. You could see prices correct. Very true.
Sure.
But the fact that people keep pulling their houses means there's less supply out there, which means economics tells you that
absolutely,
if you have demand in an area and not enough houses for sale, it's not going to cause home prices to fall.
Yeah,
so,
and I think that's the dilemma we're in some ways. It's like you've got this affordability challenge, but then you've also got this supply challenge. So how do you fix affordability? Well, you would increase supply, right? But that's not quite that easy. Yeah, that's right. That's not quite the same. I think also a lot of now I think Wilmington, by and large, we've done a great job. I think our council, our city, our elected officials have, for the most part, been pretty pro-growth. Okay,
yeah.
and I applaud them for that.
To their own detriment sometimes.
Sometimes, perhaps, but to the benefit, in my opinion, of
Yes.
every citizen that lives in this city.
Agree.
Right? I mean, yes, it is more crowded on our roads, but we also have, it gives us money for our schools. It gives. I mean, you look at what the revenue that's generated from home building and what that goes towards. It's for the benefit of a lot of people.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean,
we've got a lot of challenges right now in the home building industry. The affordability, and how do you solve that? Well, you increase the supply, right? But in this market, we're somewhat constrained by the availability. There's just not a lot of land left. It's not that easy, I guess is what I'm trying to say, to just flip a switch and increase supply.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the problem that you face in any metro area is that they've just sort of run out of space. And
then compounding that to your point with the lending side of it, right? You're in a house at a 2 or 3% mortgage. You're not as excited to move up to now a 6 or 7% mortgage. So you got that lock-in effect that's kind of keeping supply further constrained. So there's absolutely some real fundamental challenges, but I don't think that we're on the verge of a collapse. So, maybe a correction, but not a collapse.
And I think maybe national, but I think here we still have more demand than supply, which is just not a recipe for. Now, it all comes down to a certain house. I mean,
sure.
You talk to realtors about that, and they'll say, if you got a house that's maybe outdated, not in a desirable location, you might see prices falling for that house. But if you got like a really nice house, perfect spot, you're getting multiple bids. That's just the way it is. I did want to ask about one of the other big factors that comes up a lot is immigration, talking about labor.
Sure.
And there's no doubt that when you talk about labor, immigration always comes up about, work sites. And so what role do you think, because to your point, a lot of people are saying, hey, they're telling their kids not to get into, these fields. Well, meanwhile, people who are coming here, they're like, yeah, that's a great field to get into,
Right.
And so have you seen, a change recently, because obviously immigration has dropped off.
Sure.
And so is it still a lot of immigrants that are working on these sites, or is that changing at all?
I would say short answer is yes. You still see a lot of, we're going to assume that they're immigrants, right?
Yeah.
100%. A lot of immigrant labor, or maybe non-native born labor working on our job sites.
Yeah, so here's the stats. So the share of immigrants is significantly higher, 32.5% among construction tradesmen. The concentration of immigrants is particularly high in construction trades, essentially for home building, such as plasters and stucco masons, drywall, ceiling, tile installers, 61%, roofers, 52%, painters, 51%, and carpet, floor, tile installers is 45%. And so it seems like, immigration policy, you wouldn't think would have a huge impact
right.
on, or does have a huge impact on certain industries, but you would think home building is one, not only because of these numbers, but also to your point where you're talking about earlier, where you're not seeing a lot of native born children getting into trades. And so that labor had to come from somewhere. And so immigrants picked up that slack and,
as they have
over
generations. I mean, you look at
so it's sort of
look
like
at New York in the, back 100 years ago, they were, Anyway. Yeah.
And so this area in particular, I mean, with all the home building that's going on, when you do see a drop in immigration, it's going to impact your guys' business, because you're either going to have to pay more for labor or you're not going to be able to do as much work.
Yeah, absolutely, which unfortunately isn't going to help either the supply side of the equation or the affordability side. So yeah, there's certainly, and again, so that's, this is kind of a good example of how it's difficult for a small owner operator like myself to have a whole lot of impact on these things. You kind of do what you can by building the number of homes you can, but yeah, well, there's some challenges ahead for the home building industry. There's probably some solutions that could be made for that, but it probably would have to come at a national level for sure on the immigration front.
Well, it's something you can't fix with tech either, because a lot of these jobs you need a person.
No, you can't fix it with tech, and the other challenge too is you can't fix. It's difficult to fix quickly. Yeah, right, because you got to kind of put back into practice maybe some of that vocational training. That's not going to happen overnight in the high school level or the middle school level. So, you got to kind of get that back up and running. We're not having as many children as we used to have. So that's, that coupled with shutting down the border. I mean, there's a lot of factors maybe going against an increased labor supply, but that's probably going to be across all industries. It's just probably highlighted in construction because so much of the labor is done by, immigrant.
Yeah. I mean, the data supports that. And if you think about it, if you're someone who's coming into this country, and because, they even mentioned that here, because this is from the National Association of Homebuilders, and they even mentioned that it's one of the industries where, let's say you're still learning the language, you don't have an education, sort of a formal education that we would apply here in this country. It is an industry where you can start working right away. You can kind of learn on the job. Yep. And that's just a rarity for a lot of other industries, where it's like you kind of have to, speak, proficient English and have to be able to do all these other things. So if you're coming here in your sort of first generation, this is going to be an attractive profession, not to mention it's going to pay a good wage. And so it's like, those two factors are why you are going to see immigration have a bigger impact on the industry. And like I said, if we're seeing fewer of them, to your point, fewer native born people getting into that business, it's going to have an outsized impact, no doubt. But one of the other costs, besides labor, which is obviously a big one, is regulation. And it just so happened when I was doing research, getting ready for this podcast, this just came out from the National Association of Home Builders, looking at the cost of regulation on home building. And so they're looking at a $499,500 house. So basically $500,000, which is kind of median home price. What they find is that on a dollar basis, regulation accounts for $131,734 of that final price. About just under $47,000 is attributed to regulation during development, permitting, and all that we talked about. And then the other just under $85,000 is due to regulation during construction. Now, this report is not saying that, hey, we should get rid of regulation. We shouldn't have any rules. Just build whatever house you want. They're not saying that. They're just pointing out that we have seen quite the increase in regulatory costs. In fact, in 2011, it was $65,000, the average cost of regulation in a new home. Now it's $131,000. Now, obviously, home prices have skyrocketed. That could be the reasoning for why it has doubled. Home prices have doubled since 2011. But, I mean, that's 26% of your home price.
That's a big number.
Is going into regulation. And, I mean, like I said, I don't think anyone wants to get a regulation. I mean, it's good that we have rules for a house. It has to be, functioning, and you have to have this type of material, and you can't build a cheap house that's going to fall apart. That's a good thing. But at the same time, at what point does it start becoming a major hindrance on what you guys are doing?
Well, fortunately here in New Hanover County, at least for the amount of money that we're paying, at least we're getting the permits processed quickly. If I was a builder and I was having to pay 26% of my total construction cost, and it was taking me a year to get a building permit, you talk about, being really upset. But we're part of a builder group, so we meet in our group. We've got builders from all over the country, and you do hear from some of the, like, I'm thinking of a builder from Austin, another builder from Denver. In some of those jurisdictions, it might take them up to anywhere from 8 to 18 months to get a building permit. And it's just crazy. I mean, how do you plan your business around something that's going to take you 8 to 18 months to even be permitted is beyond me. But I think that's the real, I don't like paying that much in regulatory fees and that kind of thing. I don't think anybody would like paying that, but I don't necessarily have a tremendous problem with it as long as it's getting spent well and we're still being efficient at it. Okay. Now that's not any kind of green light to just keep hiking up the regulation because like it's no different than any other industry. That cost gets passed directly on to the end consumer. So, I mean, but like I said, at least we're getting our processes, our permits processed quickly. And then, I think that in the point that you just made, that may be helpful for a lot of other people to understand that builders aren't bad. That generates, like I said earlier, that helps generate a lot of revenue for the cities to help things. And I know everybody's going to say, well, they're not doing anything about our roads, or our roads are too crowded and they're still building. Well, this town wasn't ever really laid out. I mean, first of all, it's a really challenging town to do any kind of traffic planning around. If you look at it on a map, and we've got the Cape Fear River and the Atlantic Ocean. So you can't ever have like a beltway system like you have in Raleigh or DC, right? That's not an option. The roads they were just geographically, we were never going to have good roads. Whether we had half the population here that we have now, we would probably all argue 20 years ago, traffic was still bad. It definitely hasn't gotten any better, right? But other aspects of living here, I feel like I've gotten exponentially better as a direct result, probably, of how some of this housing has generated revenue for the town and city that we live in. So,
well, it's funny. I mentioned this once again on the last podcast. I think I've mentioned it before. Is that I'll see people who are nostalgic. It's always rose-colored glasses, and you'll hear a lot of people who may have grown up here in the 70s or 80s, and they'll say, "Man, this is so awful. What's happened to Wilmington? I can't believe what's happened to Wilmington. This is so awful." And then you go back and you look at like downtown Wilmington, for example. Now, I'm not going to speak to other areas, just downtown. Is that like in the 80s, 70s and 80s, like downtown Wilmington, it was like it had gotten so bad.
You didn't want to be there after dark.
It was terrifying. And then there was like strip clubs and adult bookstores and peep shows, and like it was awful. Like, I mean, I don't think anyone would look at those pictures. I mean, there's a really funny picture, you can Google it, of the Dixie Grill in like, I want to say like early 80s. And in between the Dixie Grill is two strip clubs, like on either side of it. And you're sitting there going like, I think that downtown is significantly better than it was in the 80s because of that. And so it's like, we have improved, and I get it. Traffic has gotten worse, and it's not the town that people grew up in. I get that, but nowhere is. Like, I grew up in DC. It's funny. I go back. I've only been up there like one time, I think, since I left. But I sometimes will go like on Google Maps and I'll drive around. I'm like, I don't even recognize the place. And that's DC. That's a major place. And like how much it has changed, I don't even recognize it. And so it's like, unless you're in one of those towns that's dying, you're going to see changes. And even when the town's dying, you're going to see changes because the store that was open is now closed.
That's exactly right. I mean, those are your two choices.
You're never going to avoid that. And so I think that Wilmington is a better place.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there haven't been mistakes made with regards to growth and building roads and getting it done. But I mean, to your point is, I think we are a better place with these changes. And I think that if we recognize what's good and what's bad and fix the bad, we'll be even better. But not to say like, oh, everything they did was great, because there have been, like I said, I think we need to do a little better with the roadways and the traffic and the lights, and we are going to have to build some bypasses and deal with that.
But they're working on all that.
Exactly.
And I think that's the part that a lot of people miss. Your casual social media comment maker, by and large, is pretty uninformed when it comes to all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes to make this a better place. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that
and everybody has an opinion, but they don't really know what they're talking about.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. If Bill Saffa was involved in as many real estate deals as Facebook commenters think, that this dude would be rivaling like Elon Musk with regards to wealth. Sure. Just like every time there's a new project, they're like, "Oh, Bill Saffa must be getting paid on that," and I'm like, "Man, there's no way."
All of those county commissioners, town council, city council, the mayor, all of them. I know some of them personally, and some of them I don't know at all. But the ones that I know personally, and I know that they work tirelessly to try to make this to the extent that they have control over it, and that there's something that can be done about it. They work tirelessly to make this place a better place to live, and and that sometimes unfortunately does take things like increased tax revenue or increased regulation cost for building permits and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, they're processing my permits quickly. They're not holding me up with a bunch of extra inspections, and they're making improvements to the town and city that I live in. I kind of look at that as the cost of growth.
Yeah, and I would say it's actually good to hear that with all of this growth that you guys are still getting timely permits, because it is
they do a great job. Yeah.
That's
inspections, same way. We don't have to wait. We call an inspection in. As long as you call it in by 3 p.m., they're out the next day.
That's great.
And in a lot of other parts of the country, I talk to these builder groups, and you might wait 2 or 3 days for an inspection. And again, that just increases the cost of the home,
All right, before I let you go, Greg, what do you see kind of happening going forward? I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about growth, and there's no doubt that's going to continue. I think on the last podcast I mentioned, according to the I think it was the WMPO's 2050 plan, they're projecting, what was it? We're gonna almost double in size. Or I'm sorry, we're gonna add about I think we're gonna add about 120,000 more people to the kind of Wilmington metro area. It's just nuts to think about. I mean, we're going to be close to, I think, 500,000 people kind of in this area. And so we're obviously going to see that growth. We've talked a lot about that, but what do you kind of see happening, at least maybe not 25 years? What do you see happening maybe the next 10 years?
Sure. I think that certainly growth is going to continue. Too many people want to live in this part of the world for growth not to happen. So I think our biggest challenge is going to be, how do we manage that growth? How do we plan for it? How do we manage it? And how do we set it up so that it can continue to be the wonderful place that it is to live, that we all know and love. So I think that's the challenge. And but growth. I don't think we're stopping it here in this part of the world. So I think that's a good thing. I think from a home builder perspective, a realtor's perspective, I think the market itself right now is kind of we've been in a really seller's market. I think that's kind of starting to neutralize a little bit. I think we're entering now more into buyer's market territory. I think inventory is up across the board, used inventory, new inventory. I think that's good. That maybe will help a little bit with some of the affordability. I don't think it's going to solve the problem. I'm not sure that it's entirely a problem necessarily, because I do think this is a wonderful place to live. So people are willing to pay up for it. So, no, I think growth is going to continue to happen. I think that we're entering a balanced market, which is probably a good thing for everybody. And, we're just going to keep on keeping on.
Well, Greg, I appreciate you taking the time talking about everything that's going on in Wilmington with regards to home building. And, like I said, thanks for being here, and good luck in the new role. Because when did you officially kind of took over? Started this year, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And my dad's still active. He's more active behind the scenes, but So started this year.
You're basically just the face of the you just get blamed for everything.
Pretty much. That's right. Yeah. Ownership has its privileges, right?
When something good happens, it's like, well, yeah, of course, Richard's still working here. But when something goes bad, it's because Greg took over. That's what happened. But Greg, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it.
Great. Appreciate it. Thank you, Tyler.